Hey, welcome into another edition of Husker247 Daily. I'm Mike Schaefer, joined by Michael Bruntz here on Monday morning. Nebraska finished up the bye week. Coaches were out on the road. The Huskers were able to get some extra practices in as well and got to enjoy a Saturday. We're going to watch everybody else in college football play a little bit. And Bruntz, I have lots of thoughts on just college football in general, but we're going to tailor our thoughts today more Nebraska specific. And through 1/3 of their season, we've seen a few things with Nebraska so far. But I think that we have some players we'd like to see more of. And so I guess with that being said, who's somebody that you're hoping that we see more of in the next 8 games and maybe we did in the first four? Or maybe even you can phrase the question as you'd like to see more of, but also when they have their opportunities, maybe even be a little bit more effective.
Yeah, this is kind of close to I think answering your question, but we've seen a lot of him. We've seen a lot of Williams Nwaneri, but I like what we've seen so far because I think, I want to see what more looks like from him. You've seen Pro Football Focus has him at basically 124, 125 defensive snaps right now. And I think kind of coming into the season, there was a little bit of, okay, let's see what this looks like. Former 5-star, temporary expectations. He hadn't played a lot at Missouri. Is he just going to be a rotational piece? He's been each game. You notice him a little bit more, and you see those little steps happening that I think you would have liked to have seen progress wise from him. And I think the key for Nebraska in this kind of middle 4 or 5 games of the schedule, which is going to determine where this year goes, I think he can be, a ready-made pass rush, a guy that's maybe ready to take that next step as a guy that's just going to line up and win a one-on-one to get after the quarterback. So I kind of, it's kind of, I guess, in the vein of your question, but I want to see a little bit more from him and maybe what that looks like as him taking that next step after the bye week. It just feels like a guy right now that's really kind of arrow up in my mind. How about you? Who you got?
Yeah, first I want to agree with Nwaneri that it does feel like it's getting a little bit better week by week. The other thing is with him, I just think like we're gonna see the best version of him in November, and then I think it could really change how you feel about this defense in some ways if you have a
Mm-hmm.
more disruptive player emerge up front. And
Mm-hmm.
so he's kind of one of those guys that it's going to be kind of fun to look back as to how we were talking about him earlier in the year versus what I think we could see in November. A guy that sort of fits the vein of what I was asking because he has played some, but when he's been in, he hasn't really been sort of a difference maker. And I don't know that he was always set out to be a difference maker, but I was hoping we would get a little bit more from Willis McGahee in the first 4 games of the season. And I'm hoping we get more certainly as we get into the Big Ten play. And I was never expecting like some big sack total or that this is a guy that would be, constantly getting pressure on quarterbacks every time he's in. But he was someone who flashed last year. And it's been a little bit slow so far in 2025. And when he has been in, and I'm thinking specifically that Cincinnati game, there's been some busts and some stuff in there where, frankly, playing is one thing, maximizing your opportunity and playing well is another. And so when he is on the field, I'd like to see a better version of Willis McGahee. And I know that's out there, and I think they're going to have some more opportunities as you get the Michigan States and the Marylands and the Minnesotas and Northwestern here over this middle 4-game stretch. And so hopefully he comes out of it and we're talking about a guy who has a sack or two or is able to force a fumble, things that he was doing last year as a freshman, Bruntz.
Yeah, interestingly, did not play against Michigan, only played 8 snaps against Cincinnati. So the bulk of his time has been kind of
Yeah.
in those the Akron Houston Christian type games, which I think we would have expected a little bit more, some more frequent appearances from him going into the season.
Yeah. And it's not like I'm expecting him to take a ton of more reps, certainly more than the 0 against Michigan. But I would just like to see him out there because I think he has the potential to someone who can make a flash play here or there. And, we'll see what that can add for Nebraska defensively. So we hit on a couple guys defensively. They're still on the offensive side of the ball. I think there's certainly some people out there, and there's a big storyline in the running back room. And so, I know that you're going to mention Mekhi Nelson here. I'm mostly curious to what kind of role do you think he could carve out as Nebraska tries to look for somebody as an alternative to Emmett Johnson, just because his current usage rate seems unsustainable throughout the rest of conference play.
Yeah, I'll take the low-hanging fruit here. And it's kind of going through, what Isaiah Mosey's done this year. I've really liked what Mosey's done in space. And it seems like Nebraska over the last game or so, and then I think the bye week, they were going to need to figure out kind of what that running back picture looked like. But I think Mekhi Nelson gives Nebraska probably the closest to what they're getting from Emmett Johnson. I don't know how much to expect. It feels like it's going to be. We talked going into the season that Cincinnati game was going to be an Emmett Johnson game. It's quickly turning into a Emmett Johnson season, just based on usage rate right now. But you need to get Nelson going in some form or fashion to give you a little bit more there. I just think of the guys back there, and certainly now with the different role for Mosey, they're going to turn more to Nelson. And a big piece of that's going to be pass protection. It's got to be for Emmett Johnson as well, and being more consistent there. But just having somebody on like series 3 of the game that you can give a couple carries to. I mean, that doesn't feel like a high bar, but it's one that Nebraska hasn't cleared yet. So we'll see what Mekhi Nelson looks like coming out of the bye week. There was some question about who the number 2 was, but I think he's probably the favorite versus the field right now.
The interesting thing to me too is so they clearly had some package and some stuff designed to utilize him against Michigan. When we've seen Nebraska do that against other high-profile teams, like thinking about when they set up the Dedrick Mills triple option against Ohio State, and I was told they had spent that had been something they had spent time on in fall camp and really worked that package, and so they could come out and utilize it well. They never went back to it the rest of the season.
It worked
the next
too.
Year. And it was successful. It's one of those things where Scott Frost was a gifted play caller at times, but one of the things that drove me insane is that he would find this wrinkle, but then wouldn't utilize it again. And so I'm hoping that Dana Holgorsen with some of those inside runs and some of what they designed, I think one was even a counter for Nelson that had some interesting action with the tight ends. And so I hope they come back to that. I don't want it to just disappear. And so because of that, I'd like to see some usage for Mekhi Nelson and some of those packages brought back, whether it's against a Minnesota or Northwestern or whoever. So
you're standing on the table for the diamond formation is what you're doing.
The diamond formation got used quite a bit. I will say that for Tim Beck, when he found success with it, he stuck with that a little bit. But I just go back to watching Mills against that Ohio State front, and the only success Nebraska had in that game, and I still regard that 2019 Ohio State team to be the best I've seen in person. They never went back to that. So dumb.
I mean, there's also that, would it have mattered, really?
I mean, you're telling me they couldn't have used that formation and had success against Purdue when they needed to score a touchdown and stop kicking field goals in the first half when they dominated that game and still lost that year?
They would have won a lot of those one-score games with your formation.
I agree.
Yeah.
A lot less Jack Stoll to the flats and a lot more Dedrick Mills on the triple option. That's what I'm saying.
You don't like Jack Stoll either. Okay.
I like Jack Stoll. I didn't want him in the flats. I think the history bears out okay with me on that one. So let's mention the last player we want to talk about here, and that's of course Elijah Pritchett, who's going to be discussed heavily. Matt Rule talks on Monday. I'm sure this is going to come up, and I'm hoping that Nebraska makes a move to have him as your left tackle. You can flip Gatula over to the right, see if that helps you a little bit with your pass protection issues. See if that just helps you overall as an offensive line. I think at some point you got to get your 5 best offensive linemen out there, and it's hard for me to believe that Pritchett isn't one of them. And I'm not at every practice. I'm not at everything, certainly, and they have more information, but it wouldn't be the first time that Nebraska's struggled to get its best offensive lineman on the field. And so we'll see kind of what move they make out of the bye week. Do you think there's a change coming potentially, Bruntz?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've kind of reached the point with it where it's a cost benefit analysis in some ways of like, are we okay with the occasional false start if everything else looks a little bit better consistently? Like, I think that's where you're kind of at now, and I think they're to that point. Like, and I think the question you're asking about who the best five are is an interesting one. It's one that I think Matt Rule is willing to flip somebody over there if that gets your best five out there. So yeah, I mean, I think it's time to get that handled. I mean, you've got an offense that I think can win you 8 or 9 games if the protections, you get Dillon enough protection, and you got to get that buttoned up, even if that means accepting the occasional pre-snap blunder.
Couldn't have said it better. Could not have said it better. And that's why you can get great content from Michael Bruntz at Husker247.com. Be sure to check that out. We'll have plenty of coverage leading up to this Michigan State game. Plenty of coverage from Matt Rule here on Monday, coordinators and players on Tuesday. And of course, we'll get you into the week with more Husker247 daily content, Husker247 podcast on Tuesday. The Hypecast returns. We're locking in the time, locking in our guests. So we should have that for you as well. So be sure to check out everything we got going on at Husker247. For Michael Bruntz, I'm Mike Schaefer. We'll catch you next time.